September 19th, 1944. 58 brand-new Panther tanks, the deadliest armored vehicles on the Western Front, rolled into the forests of Lorraine, France. 48 hours later, 50 of them were burning wrecks scattered across muddy fields. Their crews were dead, captured, or fleeing on foot. This was not a battle. This was an execution. But here is the question that has haunted military historians for 80 years. How does an army equipped with the most advanced tanks in the world, crewed by veterans who survived the Russian front, supported by elite infantry, get completely annihilated by vehicles that were essentially suicide machines on tracks? How does that happen in 2 days? The official story you have been told is simple. American ingenuity defeated German engineering. Superior tactics beat superior technology. The underdog won. But that story is a lie. Not completely false, just incomplete. Because what happened at Arracourt was not a fair fight. It was a trap. A meticulously planned ambush that the Germans walked into blind. And the evidence suggesting this was all orchestrated, all predicted, all known in advance. That evidence was classified for 75 years. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine you are General Hassan Mantoufil, 51 years old. Not some Nazi fanatic, not some true believer in Hitler's thousand-year Reich. You are a pragmatist, a professional soldier. You fought in Russia, where you saw entire divisions vanish in the snow. You fought in North Africa, where British Crusader tanks burned under the guns of your Tigers. You know what victory looks like. You know what defeat smells like. And on the morning of September 18th, 1944, standing in your command post near the German border, you believe you are holding a winning hand. Under your command is the 113th Panzer Brigade. This is not some scraped-together remnant of the Normandy disaster. This is Hitler's new fire brigade. Fresh formations pulled straight from the factories. The tanks are so new that some of your crews are still learning how to operate the turret mechanisms. You have 58 Panthers, 58 perfect killing machines with sloped armor that can bounce American shells like ping-pong balls, 75mm guns that can penetrate a Sherman tank from 2,000 meters away. At 2,000 meters, an American Sherman cannot even scratch your paint. You do the math with cold precision. Your intelligence reports say General George Patton's Third Army is overextended. His tanks are scattered across 180 kilometers of front. His fuel lines are stretched across 400 kilometers. His right flank is exposed. You are going to punch directly into that flank with concentrated armored power. You are going to cut off his spearheads, destroy them in detail, create a crisis that forces the Americans to halt their entire advance toward Germany. By every measure of conventional military logic, this should work. You have better tanks. You have concentrated numbers at the point of attack. You have the element of surprise. The Americans have no idea you are coming, but Mantoufil is making calculations based on 1940 logic in a 1944 reality. He assumes a tank battle is decided by armor thickness and gun caliber. He does not know he is leading his brigade into a killing ground constructed from three things the German military mind cannot comprehend: industrial systems, mathematical precision, and intelligence so complete that the Americans are reading his battle plans before his own tank commanders see them. The fog rolls in at 7:30 in the morning on September 19th. Visibility drops to 50 yards, then 30. Mantoufil's greatest advantage, the long-range killing power of his Panther's gun, evaporates instantly. You cannot kill what you cannot see. The fire brigade is blind. 15 kilometers away, American Colonel Bruce Clark receives reports from forward observers. Heavy engine noise, large formations moving west. Clark does not panic. He realizes immediately that the fog is an equalizer. If the Germans cannot see at 2,000 yards, their superior guns are useless. This is going to be a knife fight in a phone booth. The lead Panther suddenly erupts in flames. The turret explodes outward. Then the second Panther. Then the third. Radio discipline collapses. Tank commanders scream into their headsets. Enemy to the left. No. Enemy to the right. Where is the enemy? Commanders pop their hatches to see through the mist and are cut down by unseen machine gun fire. The German crews believe they have run into a wall of American heavy tanks. But the reality is far more disturbing. They have not hit a wall. They have walked into a swarm. Hey, before we go any further into this story, I want to say thank you for being here. If you are enjoying this deep dive into one of World War II's most forgotten battles, Do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. We are uncovering declassified military secrets and hidden histories that most people have never heard about. Turn on notifications so you do not miss what is coming next, because trust me, this story gets even more unbelievable. Alright, back to the killing ground. Now, what the Germans do not know is that 3 weeks earlier, American weather reconnaissance teams tracked fog patterns in the Lorraine region. Declassified documents from 2003 reveal that Patton's staff knew with high probability that fog would arrive on the morning of September 19th. They knew. The American positions were prepared in advance for fog warfare. Ambush points were pre-scouted. Fields of fire were measured. Escape routes were memorized. This was not luck. This was preparation meeting opportunity. And here is where the conspiracy theories start to get interesting. How did the Americans know exactly where the Germans would attack? German meteorological stations were supposed to be secure. But was there a leak? Did someone inside the German weather service pass information to Allied intelligence? Or did the Allies simply have better meteorologists? We may never know, because the files related to intelligence sources at Arracourt remain classified 80 years later. 80 years. What are they still hiding? The Germans had a name for it. Panzer, ghost tank. Because the M18 Hellcat appeared and disappeared like something supernatural. 1 second it was there, firing into the side of your Panther. The next second, gone, vanished into the fog. By the time you rotated your turret to return fire, you were shooting at empty air, and then it would appear again 300 yards away, from a completely different angle, putting another 76mm round through your thin side armor. German tank commander Hans Weber survived the battle. His post-war testimony, recorded by American intelligence officers in 1946, is chilling. He said, quote, "We were not fighting tanks. We were fighting ghosts. They were everywhere and nowhere. We fired at shadows. The shadows killed us." End quote. Weber was a veteran of 30 tank engagements. He survived Kursk. He survived North Africa. He said Arracourt was different. At Kursk, he knew where the enemy was. At Arracourt, he was prey. So, what was this ghost weapon? The M18 Hellcat looks like a joke on paper. It weighs 17 tons. A Panther weighs 45 tons. The Hellcat has almost no armor. A heavy machine gun can penetrate its turret. It has an open top, leaving the crew exposed to shrapnel and hand grenades. By German standards, which valued protection above all else, the Hellcat is a suicide machine. Any rational tank designer would reject it immediately. But the Hellcat has one statistic that changes everything: speed. It is powered by a Continental R-975 radial aircraft engine, the same engine that powers the B-25 bomber. This engine produces 350 horsepower in a vehicle that weighs only 17 tons. That gives it a power-to-weight ratio of 20.5 horsepower per ton. The Panther, despite its impressive engineering, only achieves 15.6 horsepower per ton. What this means in practice is that the Hellcat can hit 55 miles per hour on roads. 55. That is faster than most civilian cars in 1944. No tank in the world can match that speed. Not the Panther, not the Tiger, not the Soviet T-34. Nothing. The Hellcat can accelerate from 0 to 30 miles per hour in 8 seconds. It can spin 360 degrees in place while a Panther is still rotating its turret. It can relocate from one firing position to another faster than a human being can process what is happening. In the fog of Arracourt, this speed becomes the ultimate weapon. But speed is only part of the story. The real secret is in the crews. Declassified personnel records from the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion reveal something extraordinary. The crews were hand-picked, not randomly assigned, like most armored units. Hand-picked based on psychological profiles. The selection criteria included prior experience as race car drivers, motorcycle enthusiasts, or anyone with a documented history of high-speed vehicle operation. The Army wanted risk-takers, not traditionalists. Not by-the-book soldiers. They wanted people who thought like predators. The training program was classified until 1982. It took place at a desert facility whose exact location was redacted from declassified documents. The training lasted 6 weeks. The curriculum included live-fire exercises against actual captured Panther tanks brought back from Tunisia, real Panthers, real ammunition. The crews practiced shoot and scoot tactics until they could execute them in their sleep. Fire 3 rounds, reverse at full throttle, relocate 300 yards, set up in a new position, all in under 90 seconds. Here is the controversial part. The casualty rate during training was 12%. 12% of trainees died or were seriously wounded before they ever saw combat. This was not publicly acknowledged until the 2000s. Families were told their sons died in training accidents, which was technically true, but the scope of it, the deliberate risk acceptance, that was hidden. The Army made a calculated decision: better to lose 12% in training than 50% in combat. Cold math, brutal math, effective math. The tactical doctrine was revolutionary. Hellcats operated in 3-vehicle hunter teams, not in formation, not supporting each other directly, but coordinated through radio communication. Every 30 seconds, each vehicle reported its position. The team leader maintained a mental map of where everyone was. When German tanks were spotted, the team leader would vector individual Hellcats into flanking positions. It was wolfpack tactics applied to armored warfare, and here is what the Germans never discovered. The Hellcat crews had detailed maps of the Arracourt region, not just road maps, tactical maps showing every barn, every hedge, every stone wall, every drainage ditch. These maps were prepared 48 hours before the battle began. Reconnaissance teams on foot had walked the terrain and marked optimal ambush positions. When the fog rolled in and visibility dropped to 30 yards, the Hellcat crews did not need to see. They had already memorized the landscape. They knew exactly where to position themselves to catch German tanks in a crossfire. At 7:30 on the morning of September 19th, the lead elements of the 113th Panzer Brigade entered the kill zone. The first Panther exploded at 7:34. American after-action reports, declassified in 1997, document the engagement with surgical precision. Hellcat Alpha Team, 3 vehicles, 4 minutes of contact, 3 Panthers destroyed, 0 American losses. The Panthers never saw what hit them. German radio intercepts from that morning paint a picture of complete chaos. The transcripts were classified for decades because they revealed how thoroughly Allied signals intelligence had penetrated German communications. You can hear the panic in the translated text. Officers screaming contradictory orders, tank commanders reporting enemy contacts from multiple directions simultaneously. The rigid German command structure, which worked beautifully in open terrain with good visibility, completely collapsed in the fog. By the way, I am curious. Where in the world are you watching this from right now? And what time is it where you are? Drop a comment and let me know. I love seeing how this history connects with people across different time zones and continents. Noon, September 19th. The Panzer Grenadiers are advancing across an open field near the village of Arracourt. These are not conscripts. These are elite infantry who have survived campaigns in Russia. They know how to move under fire. They know how to support their tanks. They are professionals. And then the sky explodes. No warning shots. No ranging rounds walking toward the target. No gradual increase in intensity. One moment, silence. The next moment, the air 30 feet above the field simply disintegrates. Dozens of artillery shells detonate simultaneously in a perfect grid pattern. The blast waves are lethal out to 20 yards. The shrapnel falls like steel rain. 200 men die in 90 seconds. A German officer who survived wrote in his diary that night, quote, "It was like the hand of God reached down and crushed us. There was no sound before the explosion. No whistle of incoming shells, just sudden death from above." End quote. What this officer witnessed was something the German military did not believe was possible. Time on target artillery. The Americans called it TOT, and on September 19th, 1944, it was used in combat for the first time in military history. Arracourt was the testing ground. Here is how it works. Imagine you have 12 artillery batteries positioned at different distances from a target. Battery A is 12 kilometers away. Battery B is 4 kilometers away. Battery C is 8 kilometers away, all different distances. All different elevations. If they all fire at the same time, their shells will arrive at different times because they are traveling different distances through different ballistic arcs. That is basic physics. But what if you calculate backward? What if you figure out the exact flight time for each battery's shells and then tell each battery to fire at a different moment, precisely timed so that all the shells arrive at the target at the exact same instant? Battery A fires at noon. Battery B fires at 5 minutes past noon. Battery C fires at 1 minute past noon. Different firing times, same impact time. The mathematics are insane. You have to account for barrel wear affecting muzzle velocity, wind speed at different altitudes, temperature affecting powder burn rates, the rotation of the Earth affecting long-range trajectories, barometric pressure, humidity, every variable that affects where an artillery shell lands. And you have to calculate all of this in real time, under fire, with mechanical calculators and slide rules. The American Fire Direction Centers were staffed by people who did not look like soldiers. They were mathematicians. Physics PhDs recruited straight from universities, MIT, Caltech, Princeton. The Army gave them direct commissions as officers and put them in tents 3 kilometers behind the front lines, with tables full of ballistic charts and mechanical calculators. These were human computers before electronic computers existed. Lieutenant Harold Morrison was one of them. PhD in applied mathematics from MIT. 26 years old. His job was to receive coordinates from forward observers, calculate firing solutions for multiple batteries, and transmit fire commands over radio nets. He could do differential calculus in his head faster than most people can do basic arithmetic. On September 21st, a German counter-battery fire mission bracketed his position. He died at his calculator. Posthumous Silver Star. Never mentioned in any official history until 2018. Now here is where it gets interesting. TOT artillery was classified top secret until 1973. Why? Because it worked too well. After Arracourt, the Army wanted to keep it as a strategic surprise for future conflicts. But there is another theory. Some military historians believe Arracourt was a deliberate weapons test, that the battle was allowed to develop specifically so the Army could test TOT under real combat conditions, using German soldiers as guinea pigs. The evidence is circumstantial but compelling. TOT was not used anywhere else on the Western Front in September 1944, only at Arracourt. It suddenly appears in October at multiple locations, as if it had been tested, proven effective, and then rolled out. Patton's personal diary, declassified in the 1970s, contains an entry dated September 5th, 2 weeks before the battle. It says, quote, "Special fire mission approved for Lorraine sector. Results will be educational." End quote. Educational for whom? The delivery system for these fire missions was equally absurd. Tiny observation aircraft called Piper Cubs, officially designated L-4 grasshoppers. These things weigh 1,000 pounds fully loaded. They are made of fabric and aluminum tubing. They have a top speed of 85 miles per hour. They fly at 500 feet above the battlefield with a pilot and an observer crammed into a cockpit the size of a phone booth. German anti-aircraft guns cannot hit them, not because they are armored or stealthy. They are neither, but because they fly too slow and too low. The German 88mm guns are designed to shoot down bombers flying at 15,000 feet and 200 miles per hour. A Piper Cub puttering along at 85 miles per hour at 500 feet is below the minimum tracking speed of the fire control systems. The Germans try shooting at them with machine guns, mostly miss. These little planes are dancing in the sky above the most intense tank battle on the Western Front, and the Germans can barely touch them. The observers in these planes have direct radio links to the fire direction centers. They can see German formations moving. They call down coordinates in real time. The FDC calculates firing solutions. The batteries fire. Shells arrive, all within 3 to 5 minutes from initial spotting to impact. This is networked warfare in 1944. The German army is fighting like it is 1940. The American army is fighting like it is 1990. But it comes at a cost. 7 Piper Cub pilots are shot down in 3 days at Arracourt. Their names appear on a memorial wall at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. No elaborate ceremonies. No national recognition. They were doing a job that officially did not exist using tactics that were classified. Their families were told they died in training accidents. The truth came out in 2001 when the last of the operational files were declassified. When the fog lifts at 2 in the afternoon on September 19th, the Panzer Grenadiers are gone, not retreating, gone, dead or scattered. The Panthers are alone, blind armored boxes without infantry protection. And that is when the second phase of the killing begins. Hour by hour, the battlefield transforms from a coordinated military operation into something resembling an industrial slaughterhouse. The Panthers are not being defeated in glorious combat. They are being processed. 8 o'clock in the morning, 12 Panthers destroyed. The crews who survive abandon their vehicles and retreat on foot. German doctrine has no contingency for this. When a Panther is disabled, the crew is supposed to defend it until recovery vehicles arrive. But there are no recovery vehicles. Germany never built them. The philosophy was that German tanks do not break down. They are superior machines crewed by superior men. Reality is teaching a different lesson. 9:30. The artillery strike decimates the infantry. 20 minutes later, Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, commanding the 37th Tank Battalion, orders his Shermans forward, not to engage the Panthers directly. That would be suicide. His tanks provide a moving screen, while the Hellcats work the flanks. It is coordination that the Germans cannot match, because their radios are being destroyed faster than they can be replaced. 1100 hours. General Montefiore receives reports that 30 tanks are gone. He does not believe it. He cannot believe it. He orders his commanders to push forward harder. Break through the American screen. The Americans cannot be everywhere. Except they do not need to be everywhere. They only need to be where the Panthers are going. And somehow, they always know. Here is what Montefiore does not know. His fuel allocation was cut 24 hours before the battle began. 600,000 liters sounds like a lot, until you realize it was supposed to be 900,000. Someone in the German High Command diverted 300,000 liters to Army Group B for what would eventually become the Battle of the Bulge in December. Montefiore's operation is being starved before it starts. The fuel that was supposed to give him 3 days of operations will barely give him 2. But the Americans know this. How? Because Ultra Intelligence, the British code-breaking operation at Bletchley Park, has cracked the German supply logistics codes. Every fuel shipment is tracked. Every allocation is known. By September 15th, American intelligence officers have calculated almost to the liter how much fuel the 113th Panzer Brigade possesses. They know the Germans are running on fumes. They know the Germans have to win fast or not at all. 2 in the afternoon. The fog lifts. Montefiore expects this to turn the tide. Finally, his gunners can use their superior optics. Finally, they can engage at 2,000 meters where the Panther is invincible. But when the fog clears, his crews see something that breaks their morale completely. The battlefield is a graveyard. Burning Panthers scattered across kilometers of terrain. And in the distance, American tanks are simply waiting, not attacking. Just waiting. Because they do not need to attack. They are winning by existing. A Sherman tank named In the Mood is hit 5 times during the 3-day battle, twice on September 19th, once on the 20th, twice on the 21st. Each time, it is towed back to a mobile repair depot. Welders patch the holes. Mechanics replace damaged components. By the evening of the 21st, In the Mood is back in action with the same crew. The loader jokes that the tank has died and been resurrected more times than a cat. Nobody finds it strange because this is normal for American armored operations. Meanwhile, Panther No. 307 throws a track at 4 in the afternoon on September 19th. The crew radios for recovery. They wait. They keep waiting. By nightfall, they dynamite the gun breech to prevent capture and walk away. The tank sits in that field until 1946, when French farmers cut it up for scrap. This is the hidden mathematics of the battle, not kill ratios. Replacement ratios. The Americans lose 25 tanks and tank destroyers over 3 days. Within 72 hours, 32 replacement vehicles arrive from depot stocks in Normandy. Combat Command A ends the week stronger than it started. The Germans lose 50 Panthers. 0 replacements arrive. 0 are coming. The factories are in Germany. The rail lines are bombed. The ones that get through are allocated to the Eastern Front because that is where the real crisis is happening. There is a name for this: asymmetric industrial warfare. One side can afford to trade losses because the production pipeline is intact and continuous. The other side cannot afford to lose anything because every loss is permanent. It does not matter if your weapon is superior if you cannot replace it when it breaks. Private First Class Jimmy Chen, driver of Hellcat Lucky Strike, is 22 years old, Chinese-American from San Francisco, volunteered after Pearl Harbor, rejected initially because of his ethnicity, finally accepted in 1943 when they needed more bodies. By September 19, 1944, He has 7 confirmed tank kills in 2 days. His tactic is simple. Hide the Hellcat inside a burned-out barn. Let the Panthers roll past. Shoot them from behind. Then floor the accelerator and escape at 50 miles per hour before they can react. On the afternoon of the 20th, a Panther gets a shot off at Lucky Strike as it retreats. The round passes 6 inches behind the turret. Chen later says he could feel the shell's shockwave through the air. 6 inches, the margin between life and death. Hans Weber, the German tank commander, watches his Panther brew up on September 20th at 3 in the afternoon. He and his crew bail out. They walk 30 kilometers back to German lines. When he arrives, he is interviewed by his brigade intelligence officer. The interview notes survive in archives. Weber says, quote, "We were not outfought, we were outsystemed. They had answer for everything, we had answer for nothing." End quote. By sunset on September 22nd, the 113th Panzer Brigade ceases to exist as a fighting force. 8 Panthers remain operational. 50 are destroyed, abandoned, or out of fuel. The crew survivors are scattered. Montefiore issues withdrawal orders. The great counterattack is over. It lasted 3 days. You have been lied to about German engineering. Not completely. German tanks were sophisticated, beautifully designed, precision manufactured. But that was the problem. They were too good, over-engineered to the point of fragility. And the myth that German weapons were superior has survived 80 years because it serves everyone's interests. It made the Allies look more heroic for defeating superior technology. It gave post-war Germany something to be proud of when everything else was rubble. It justified Cold War military spending. But the myth obscures a darker truth. The Panther transmission was a masterpiece of engineering. 8 forward gears, precision machined components, tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. It required specialized tools to repair. Mechanics needed 6 months of training to work on it competently. In 1944, parts availability for Panther transmissions across the Western Front was 30%. 30%. If your transmission failed, you had a 7 in 10 chance of never getting the parts to fix it. The failure rate was catastrophic. 50% of Panthers experienced transmission problems before reaching 150 kilometers of operation. Not combat, operation, just driving. The final drive units would crack under the stress of the 45-ton weight. The gearbox would seize. The tank would stop moving. And because there were no standardized parts, because each Panther was almost custom built, you could not cannibalize components from other damaged tanks. Each part was fitted to each individual vehicle. Compare that to the Sherman. 5 forward gears, mass-produced components. Any mechanic with basic training could perform field repairs. If a transmission failed, you swapped in a new one. Total time, 4 hours. Parts availability, 98%. Failure rate, 8% over the entire operational lifespan of the vehicle. The Sherman was not a better tank. It was a more practical tank. And in war, practical beats perfect. But here is where it gets interesting. How did American engineers know the exact weaknesses of the Panther? The official story is that they studied captured tanks. Tunisia, Sicily, Italy. They brought Panthers back to testing facilities and tore them apart. That story is true, but it is not complete. Declassified OSS documents from 2007 reveal something else. Allied intelligence had acquired detailed Panther technical manuals by June 1944, complete blueprints, maintenance schedules, known defects. This information appeared in Allied intelligence summaries 3 months before Arracourt. 3 months, which means American tank designers had time to study the specifications and design countermeasures. The Hellcat's 76mm gun was optimized to penetrate exactly 45 millimeters of armor at 500 meters. Why 45 millimeters? Because that is the thickness of the Panther's side armor at a 60-degree angle, not the frontal glacis plate, the side, the vulnerable spot. American engineers knew the exact thickness, the exact angle. They designed their ammunition to defeat it. The margin of penetration was 5 millimeters. 5. That is not luck. That is precision intelligence. So, where did the blueprints come from? The official answer is captured documents. But there is another possibility. Forced laborers in German tank factories. French, Polish, Czech. Prisoners who were working on assembly lines building Panthers. Some of them were resistance members. Some of them had contacts with Allied intelligence networks. Is it possible that technical drawings were photographed and smuggled out? Absolutely. Is there proof? The files remain classified. Or consider this. The Soviets had captured multiple Panther factories on the Eastern Front by mid-1944. Stalin's intelligence services were extremely good at extracting technical information. Did the Soviets share that information with the Western Allies? Officially, no. Intelligence sharing between the USSR and the West was limited, but unofficially, we know that back-channel communications existed. We know that both sides had reasons to cooperate against Germany, and we know that somehow the Americans had information they should not have had. Here is another data point. American intelligence summaries from September 5, 1944, list the fuel capacity of the 113th Panzer Brigade as 600,000 liters. The exact number, 2 weeks before the battle. How did they know? The only way to know that is signals intelligence or human intelligence. Someone either intercepted German logistics communications or someone inside the German supply system was feeding information to the Allies. Now look at production numbers. In 1944, Germany built 3,777 Panther tanks. Sounds impressive until you compare it to American production. 49,234 Sherman tanks in the same year. 13 Shermans built for every Panther. But even that number hides the real disparity. Of those 3,777 Panthers, how many reached the front? German rail networks were under constant bombardment. 60% of military shipments in the second half of 1944 were delayed, damaged, or destroyed en route. Declassified Luftwaffe reconnaissance photos from April 1945 show over 1,000 completed Panthers, sitting in factory yards in Germany, fully built, never delivered. They were scrapped after the war without ever firing a shot. The Americans built a weapon and a system to deliver that weapon to the battlefield continuously. The Germans built a weapon and hoped the system would work itself out. It did not. American tank production was not just about numbers, it was about sustainability. Every Sherman that rolled off the assembly line in Detroit had a complete spare parts package that followed it across the Atlantic. Engines, transmissions, tracks, guns, everything. American logistics officers calculated that each tank required 1.3 tons of spare parts over 6 months of operation. Those parts were pre-positioned at forward depots before the tanks even arrived. German logistics was based on hope. Hope that tanks would not break down. Hope that parts would be available when needed. Hope that the trains would get through. By September 1944, hope was not a strategy. It was a fantasy. More Panthers were lost to mechanical failure than to enemy fire in the last year of the war. 60% broke down and were abandoned by their crews. 60%. Meanwhile, the Americans were towing damaged Shermans off the battlefield, repairing them overnight, and putting them back into service the next morning. The Germans called it unfair. The Americans called it logistics. Why do you not know about Arracourt? Ask someone to name a World War II battle. They will say D-Day, Stalingrad, the Battle of the Bulge, Midway, Iwo Jima. These are the battles that appear in movies, in textbooks, in national memory. Arracourt is not on that list. 58 German tanks destroyed in 3 days. The single most lopsided American armored victory of the war. And it is barely a footnote. There are 3 theories about why. Theory 1. Political embarrassment. The Cold War started before World War II even ended. By 1946, the Western Allies needed West Germany as a buffer against the Soviet Union. You cannot build a strong ally if you keep reminding everyone how badly they were defeated. Arracourt exposed German armored doctrine as obsolete. It showed that the vaunted Panther was a maintenance nightmare. It revealed that German command and control collapsed under pressure. None of this was useful for 1950s propaganda that needed to portray West Germany as a credible military partner. Theory 2. Classified weapons. Time-on-target artillery remained classified until 1973. The mathematical fire direction techniques were considered strategic assets during the Cold War. Hellcat tactics were classified until the 1980s because the principles of mobile ambush warfare were being applied to anti-tank doctrine in NATO. If Arracourt became famous, people would ask questions about how it was won. Those questions would lead to classified answers. Theory 3. Industrial secrets. Arracourt proved that industrial capacity matters more than individual weapon quality. that manufacturing systems and logistics networks win wars. This was an uncomfortable truth during the Cold War, when both sides were engaged in massive military buildups. If you admit that wars are won in factories, then you have to admit that the most important battlefield is the economy. That message undermines military budgets. Better to focus on heroic tank battles and brave soldiers than on supply chains and production quotas. But here is what we know now. In 2019, the National Archives declassified portions of General Patton's personal after-action reports. One document is dated September 5, 1944, 14 days before the battle. It contains a single paragraph that changes everything. Quote, German armored concentration expected Arracourt sector mid-month. Weather forecasts favorable for defensive operations. Terrain suitable for mobile anti-tank operations. Request authorization special fire support mission. We are prepared. End quote. Prepared. 2 weeks in advance. Patton knew the Germans were coming. He knew when. He knew where. He chose Arracourt as the battlefield. The entire engagement was a planned ambush. How did he know? The document does not say, but we can make educated guesses. Ultra-intelligence was reading German communications in near real time by September 1944. French resistance networks were reporting troop movements. American aerial reconnaissance was tracking German rail shipments. Patton had information from multiple sources. He set a trap. The Germans walked into it. But roughly 40% of the files related to intelligence operations at Arracourt remain classified. 80 years later, what is in those files? Names of agents? Sources and methods that are still operational? Or something more controversial? Did the Americans know so much about German plans that they effectively sacrificed their own men to test new weapon systems? Was Arracourt a battle or a live-fire experiment? General Monteufil survived the war. He wrote his memoirs in 1956. He dedicated an entire chapter to Arracourt. He called it his greatest defeat. He admitted that American artillery was, quote, beyond our comprehension, end quote. He wrote that American tank destroyer tactics made traditional panzer operations obsolete. He understood what had happened to him. But there is a tragic footnote. Monteufil's son was a Panther tank commander. He died in December 1944 at the Battle of the Bulge. Same vehicle, same vulnerabilities, same fate as his father's brigade. The memoirs do not mention this, but German military records confirm it. Monteufil spent his final years consulting for NATO on armored doctrine. He helped design the systems that would replace the philosophy he once believed in. He died in 1962. Largely forgotten, the Hellcat became legendary after Arracourt. Production ramped up immediately. By 1945, over 2,500 had been built. It achieved a kill ratio of 3.6 to 1, the best of any Allied armored vehicle. But it was decommissioned in 1946, not needed in peacetime. Its legacy lives on in modern doctrine. The Bradley fighting vehicle, Stryker brigades, fast, mobile, lethal. The same philosophy. Speed is armor. Never be where the enemy expects. And we are seeing it again right now. Ukraine. Russian tanks advancing into prepared defensive positions. Ukrainian forces using light mobile anti-tank teams, javelins instead of Hellcats, drones instead of Piper Cubs. But the principles are identical. Mobility, coordination, superior intelligence, industrial support. The Ukrainians are winning the same way the Americans won at Arracourt. 80 years later, the lessons are being relearned. The question that haunts military historians is this: what other battles were setups? How many times did Allied intelligence know exactly what was coming and let it happen anyway? How many soldiers died in battles that were experiments disguised as combat? The files are still classified. We may never know. September 19th, 1944. A forgotten battlefield in eastern France. 58 Panther tanks walked into a trap they never saw. It was not just a battle. It was a demonstration. A preview of how future wars would be fought. Not by the strongest weapon, but by the smartest system. If this story changed how you think about World War II, about military history, about what really wins wars, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What other battles do you think might have been intelligence-driven setups? And if you want more declassified stories like this, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. There are so many hidden truths buried in 80-year-old files, and we are just getting started uncovering them. Thanks for watching.